Oops, I just lost my... Okay, welcome to District 45 webinar on effective facilitation presented by Heather Perkins. I am your moderator, Jeff Hebert, District 45 Program Quality Director for 2017 to 2018. This webinar is provided to our members to help you lead productive sessions at Toastmasters Leadership Institute. This webinar will help you understand how facilitation is different from typical training, how to use facilitation, and how to handle common problems that you may face. Our trainer today is Heather Perkins, Distinguished Toastmaster. Heather is a central leader in our district. Heather is currently our district newsletter editor and our Division F director in Nova Scotia. She has served in several leadership, well, I think pretty much every leadership role there is, between every club officer position all the way up to district governor. She actually served as district governor twice, and she was our inaugural Region 9 advisor. In her professional life, Heather is a program evaluator. In this role, she has facilitated hundreds of focus groups. Heather is drawing upon her experience, or on this experience, for the session tonight on effective facilitation. So Heather, please tell us about effective facilitation.
Thank you, Jeff. It sounds like maybe a couple other people have come on. Can you let me know who else is there?
Yep, we just got Daryl and Suzanne Melling.
I'm here.
Hi, everyone.
Very good. Remember to mute yourselves when you're not speaking.
Okay, welcome everyone. Jeff said you could put in the chat box, but I think just unmute yourself if you want to talk, because I will be asking questions. I encourage you to ask questions throughout. Just try not to walk over somebody who is already speaking. Okay, the first, what is facilitation? And this is a group exercise here. I'd like to hear your definition of facilitation. Anyone? You have to unmute yourself if you want to speak.
Is it shouting and screaming? So telling folks all the answers.
Part of it is guiding a conversation.
Guiding a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Getting people to be involved.
Mm-hmm. Okay, does anyone else have anything other than that? No, those are all good definitions. Facilitate means to make things easier. So facilitation is, as was just said, guiding people through a process. You are not the seat of wisdom. You are not acting as the expert on the topic. And that's something that's really important to remember. And it's one of the reasons that I wanted to do this, because I've seen too many TLIs where we've asked people to lead a discussion, and I find that the person who's supposed to be the facilitator is spending most of the time talking. If you are spending most of the time talking as the facilitator, then you are not doing your job as facilitator, because it is that getting people involved. Okay, so let's look at some of the differences between facilitation and training. So facilitation is about helping the thinking in a group, getting people to share ideas, to bounce ideas off of each other, to think about whatever the topic is under discussion. It's a collaborative process. So we're learning by sharing from each other. The more that you can get people, all of the people sharing, the better the process is going to be, and the more the people are going to learn from it. It's about communicating ideas, not necessarily communicating facts. You need to be flexible. And we're going to talk about that throughout, because it is something that's really important, is the ability to be flexible while you're being the facilitator. Because when you're facilitating a discussion, it can sometimes go in directions that you weren't necessarily anticipating. So you have to be flexible to deal with that, figure out how you're going to deal with that. But as I say, we will talk about it a bit more as we go along. And you get immediate results because you're getting the ideas right there and then. Training is you're passing on knowledge and content. You've got very specific information that you are passing on to someone else, so that you're acting as the teacher. Your audience is your students. You're acting as basically the expert, the one with the knowledge on it. It's about applying content. It tends to be linear, so that you start at point A, you go to B, C, so on. Whereas with facilitation, things can go off in completely different tangents, and your job then as a facilitator is eventually to get it back. But sometimes it's important to let things go the way that they end up going in the group. And it's about longer term outcomes. You want people to take this knowledge that you're passing on to them and do something with it at some other point in time. Okay, any questions or comments on that?
Yeah, Heather, I actually have a question. How would you categorize what you're doing right now? Is it facilitation or training?
This is more training with,
More training.
I'm hoping, a bit of facilitation
Exactly. That's kind of what I was thinking.
built into it.
Right. When you asked us to discuss things earlier, that's kind of more the facilitation side. Is that right?
Well, except that it's discussing it with the intent of passing on knowledge. And so that it's going to still be more of me as the, in quotes, expert on the topic, rather than drawing out the information. A lot of focus groups that I do, I make it clear at the start that I am not the content knowledge, the person with the content knowledge. Sometimes I pretend that I really know nothing about the program that I'm asking about, even if I do, because with the type of thing I do, where it tends to be social programs and whatnot, and we're asking people how they made out with this program, and which is going to be somewhat similar to the club officer roles when you're asking them, how have you made out so far as VPM or treasurer or whatever. You don't want them to start asking questions of, well, how come when I try to do this on the website it doesn't work? Okay, because you spend then all your time answering questions,
right,
and not getting ideas out of people, not doing that idea generation. So like I often have to go through a process with focus groups. People will say, well, I don't understand why I got this and somebody else didn't, or they got this and I didn't get that. And I just have to say, well, you would have to talk to your whoever about that. Like, I don't have that type of knowledge on this program. And after you say it 3 or 4 times, and they finally believe you, and then they start talking about the things that you want them to talk about.
Okay, so
Okay, but
facilitation. Yeah, I'm
whereas
sorry.
with training, like where this is training, but I can still say, I say, what questions do you have to make sure that I'm communicating it clearly? And I can still get your ideas so that I know what people are thinking, but it's just focused in a different way.
Okay, so facilitation or gosh, I did it. Facilitation. It's not brainstorming, and it's not problem solving,
No,
or
it can
maybe
be those
it
things,
can be. Okay,
but
it's not
it's
exclusively.
yeah, but it's the group doing it versus you
Okay.
passing it on. Okay,
Hopefully
and
that's clear to everyone.
and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along. Okay, with getting started. Okay, be prepared. It says, know what you want to get out of the session. What do you want to walk away with at the end of this? Because that is going to influence how you handle discussions that go off in different directions and whatnot. Is there a problem that you're trying to solve? Do you want to get consensus from the group? Or are you just getting their opinions? What did you like about this? What didn't work well? What changes would you make? Those sorts of things. If all you're doing is that information gathering, then that's going to be different than, say, if we want to walk away from here with a solution to this particular problem, or we want to generate 5 ideas that we can all take back and do something with. They can both be facilitation, but it's just somewhat of a different approach to it. If it's problem solving or reaching consensus, you need to be somewhat more directive than if all you're doing is getting their feedback on whatever. But also, it's still important, like, we'll go into a focus group with, say, 4 or 5 questions that we want to get their answers on. Now, if those questions are just for the sake of trying to get them talking, and we let them go and we take whatever information, then that's great. But if we have to report on something for each of the 4 questions we have, we're going to need to make sure that we talk about each of the 4 questions. So again, it will influence how you manage the time, where you allow the discussion to go. And so it's important to know what you need to get out of the session. And often what the group has to say can be more important than the questions that you may have going into it. But you need to know how important those specific questions are as to whether you really need to talk about all of them. Is that clear?
Yeah, I think that sounds really good, Heather. The other thing that I have found is, you mentioned earlier, you have to be flexible because sometimes you can go off in that tangent, and sometimes, like you alluded to, you really do have to listen to what they have to say. Otherwise, you're not going to make any progress at all going forward. So it's really important to kind of get that out of the way and then figure out ways in which all of the questions can work. And it might be different for different groups. I mean, it could be, groups of 4 taking one question and dividing it up, or it could be just everybody brainstorming and having a couple people be the spokesperson for the group.
Right.
But everyone learns differently.
Yeah. And what Jennifer said about sometimes you have to let things get out of the way to be able to move on. And that's true. And you've got to recognize that. One time we were doing focus groups with participants in this particular program. And the very first question that we were asking was, what have you been able to do because of this program that you wouldn't have been able to do otherwise? So the very first person says, well, you know what I don't like about this program? And well, but what I want to hear is what you got out of it, you know, what it's allowed you to do. Yeah, but what I don't like about the program, well, it became pretty evident pretty quickly that if we didn't give them some time to talk about what they didn't like, we were never going to get the rest of the questions answered. And every focus group with this program, except for one, that's what they wanted to talk about first. So we didn't change our questions, but we knew that was going to happen. And we allowed it to happen, and then we could move on. The interesting thing is that often the first response that you get can also influence the direction that the rest of the responses will take, because the last group that we were doing, we go through the same process. We ask that same question first, you know, what did you get out of this? And one person said, I got a job that I wouldn't have gotten if it hadn't been for this program. Well, then everybody else started talking about what the program did for them because the first comment was positive. So you have to be aware of that as well, because it will affect where things might go. Okay, any other comments on that? Okay, create an inclusive environment. And part of that is knowing your audience. Don't let yourself end up in a situation that I found myself in one time where somebody else was arranging the focus group for me, and half the people were blind and half the people were deaf. And there was no sign language interpreter there. It was not an environment I was prepared for. We managed to work with it, but we had to work to ensure that it was inclusive of everybody. And some of that's just the way that the room is set up, you know, that people are going to feel comfortable in it, that, you know, you don't want it too hot, too cold. I mean, I know sometimes these things are out of your control, but to the extent that you can, then you want to make sure that, you know, you don't have some people sitting behind a post so that they can't be seen. And, you know, it's going to be harder for them to feel included if you never see them. You just need to be thinking about those sorts of things when you're preparing for it. If you can be in a room where you're going to be doing it in advance and determine how it's going to be set up, that's good. Again, sometimes these things are out of your control, but to the extent that you should control them, then you should be aware of them. And if you haven't been able to do anything in advance, when you get in and you say, ooh, I just don't like the feel of the room the way that it's set up, well, then figure out how to change it. You know, like make sure that if you know that you've got somebody in a wheelchair, make sure that there's enough space that they can move between tables or through the aisle or whatever the setup is. You know, you don't want them to, again, feel uncomfortable because they feel that they can't even become part of the group. Okay, and then the next one is establish ground rules. And this is so important. Does anybody have any suggestions about what ground rules might be?
Confidentiality is always at the top of my list.
Confidentiality, okay.
One person talking at a time.
Yep.
Absolutely. Being
There are no
respectful of
bad
others'
ideas?
opinions.
Okay. Be respectful, no bad ideas. Yep.
How about each participant needs to actually participate?
I would suggest that you not have that as a ground rule. You want to try to create the environment where people want to participate and not feel that they have to participate. Part of your challenge as a facilitator is getting those people who aren't participating to participate. But sometimes you've also got to accept that some people will not participate in the group. What they will sometimes do is come up to you individually when the group is done and say, this is what I would like to say. So you're still getting their information. It's just not in the group session. And I would not want to put someone on the spot to the extent of saying, you have to say something. Possibly when you're dealing with club officers, with Toastmasters, these folks are taking on leadership roles. They should be willing to speak. I'm thinking of this more from a more general application, and a lot of the groups that I have done focus groups with are disadvantaged groups in one way or another, and it's sometimes difficult for them to speak out in front of others. And I really wouldn't want to put them on the spot. So I would be hesitant of having that as a ground rule. We're working on the assumption that the focus groups we're doing here are voluntary, that they're not, this isn't a situation where it's a marketing thing and you're being paid for being there. If you're being paid for being there, well, then that's a different matter. Then you should be expecting to speak up. But I'm thinking more of the volunteer type situation.
Well, we all get paid for our Toastmasters leadership time, don't we?
Oh, yeah. Every year I get more zeros added on to the end.
Yeah, from the beginning to the end.
Yeah. Any other suggestions for ground rules? Okay, those are all good.
Making sure that everyone is actually agreeing.
I think we had two people. Okay, Jennifer, you had something. Jennifer?
I forgot now.
It's that instant erase. It's always a problem, isn't it? Okay, who was the other person speaking?
I think it was Sarah.
Sarah, did you have something?
If there are any time constraints to the conversation, those should be stated up front. Say if we have 5 minutes for this topic or 10 minutes.
Yeah. And again, that goes along with knowing what you want to get out of it and whether you really have to address everything. And that is part of your role as a facilitator to manage that time throughout.
Yeah, Heather, I just thought of something that I use at work a lot. It's called a parking lot. So that when you have folks that have, I don't really like this, or are kind of talking about an important topic, but it's off of your current agenda, you can put it in the parking lot and get to it later.
Yeah, and we'll actually talk about that a bit more as well. But yeah, those are all good ground rules. Particularly one person talking at a time, and the being respectful.
Oh yeah.
Which
Rhonda
and
just
the no bad ideas goes along with the be respectful as well. and confidentiality. What gets said in this room stays in this room. And all those are very important. It's good going into it. You should have an idea of what you want the ground rules to be, but try to let the group set the ground rules. Now, if they don't come up, if they're hesitant to name anything at the start, then you throw out one like confidentiality and then see if they come up with one. You can say, and for me, this is a ground rule. So if they don't come up with something that you think is important, like they be respectful, then you're still going to make sure it's out there as a ground rule. But if you can get it out of them, it is generally just that much more effective, because then it's their ground rule rather than your ground rule. And then the final thing at the start is go over what the objectives of the session are. Why are we here? What do we want to get out of this? And how can you contribute to the process? Okay. So during the session, have someone, not you, have someone else flip chart the responses. Anyone have any idea to why I say you shouldn't be flip charting?
You want to be focused on the group and what the participation is, not having any break in that and sort of interfering with the flow.
Right. And you need to be continually synthesizing what people are saying and making those connections, being aware of what's going on in the room. And when you're flip charting, it's hard for you to do that.
Yeah, we can't multitask.
No, we think we can, but we don't do it very well. But what's great is if you can actually bring somebody in with you who can flip chart. If you've got to get somebody from the group, then what I would suggest is to swap it up occasionally, because the person who's flip charting, they can still say something, but it's just a little bit more difficult for them to contribute when they're also flip charting. So by saying, okay, you've been flip charting for 10 minutes, let's have another volunteer, then that allows everybody to also be part of the audience.
Heather?
So, yeah.
Rhonda also mentions that when you're writing on the flip chart, you've got your back to the audience. You're kind of cutting them off.
Yeah. We're not only cutting them off, but cutting you off from them, in that if they're making faces or anything, you can't see that. You can't read the body language while you're flip charting. And so you want to be watching the audience all the time, making sure no one's falling asleep on you or anything like that. But, when you see that somebody just is looking skeptical about it, like, you want to be able to pick up on those types of clues. So always try to get someone else to flip chart the responses. You can facilitate a discussion group where you're not flip charting the responses, but it does help to both clarify and focus when it is being flip charted, and it gives you something to go back to afterwards to see what people have said. And in that situation where half the people were blind and half the people were deaf, I just said, responses will be written on the flip chart, and I will review each page before we move on. Had to do something to ensure that they knew what was being written down there. Okay. Be an active listener. Now, as a Toastmaster, we should always be practicing our listening skills, but sometimes we manage to not listen very effectively or very actively. One way of being an active listener is to mirror the other person's responses. And that's just giving back to them exactly what they said. And then you can paraphrase. So you can say, well, so I think I heard you say, or you can sort of use your own example to say, so is this the type of thing you're talking about? And ask questions. So, okay, now, what did you mean when you said this? Or, when you're asking for what are characteristics of something, what are characteristics of a good mentor? And somebody throws something out and you're not sure. I mean, you want to be clear, so go back. But even if you think it doesn't hurt sometimes if it's something, that could be taken one of a couple of ways. Go back and ask them what they meant by it. So to be sure that you're on the same page and that everybody else also understands what the person meant. Now, hopefully somebody else, if they didn't understand, would say, what did you mean by that? But sometimes people won't ask questions of other people in the group. And they be flexible. We've talked about that already. I cannot stress this enough. If you want it to be that you're getting their ideas, sometimes their ideas are not what you were expecting. And so things start going somewhere else. If you're really there to collect their ideas rather than what you hope to hear, then you have to be willing to go with that. So you have to be continually assessing, okay, is this contributing to what we need? If it's not, is it something that I can ignore? Can we say this is something that we'll put on the parking lot and come back to it if we have time? Or is it something, there are times that you've got to make a call that this particular issue that came up is important enough that we have to explore that, even though it was not what we thought we were here to talk about. And, again, with a lot of the groups that I do, focus groups, if somebody starts talking about abuse of some type or whatnot, sometimes, and it's not a comfortable thing, but sometimes you have to allow, particularly when you see other people nodding their heads and everything, you have to allow those discussions to happen so that people can move forward. And, hopefully with the discussions that people facilitate with the TLIs, it won't be the situation, but sometimes as a facilitator, you need somebody to debrief to because of the things that you end up hearing, which are, that weren't expected. So as I say, the flexibility is just so essential. Make sure that throughout you give clear instructions. If you need to move on to another question, say, okay, we're moving on. If you have further ideas that you would like to pass on about this, you can email me and here's my email, or you can call this number, or whatever. Like, if there are ways that you want them to know, be sure that they're always aware throughout the session that you're encouraging everybody to participate. But if you want that opportunity for them to be able to contribute after the fact, make sure that they understand how they go about doing that. Manage the time, and we've touched on that a couple of times already. Again, you need to know if I've got 4 questions and I really need to get information on each of these questions. I have an hour. So how long, so you can figure it out. You got so much time for introductions and whatnot. So this is approximately how much time. And you might have a sense that some questions will be able to be dealt with more quickly than others. Take that into account. But you always have to be aware of the time. People, if you've told them that it's for an hour, when the hour is up, they want to be done. And in the context of the TLI, we don't have time because you're moving on to another session. So you can't allow the discussion to keep going, even though sometimes you'd like to. The point is, people have to go to another session, and it's holding everything up if you don't manage your time so that you wrap up when you're supposed to. So just always be aware of that. You can always ask somebody so that you don't feel like you're always looking at the time yourself. I mean, I know when our TLIs, we always have somebody go around usually and say, okay, you've got 5 minutes left into each of the breakout groups. But, ask somebody to give you a signal when this much time is up, or, figure out what will work for you. And, maybe you put the timer on your phone, and so that you can see when you're at kind of critical points. And then summarize regularly and get agreement. So when you've been talking about one idea for a while, and it's also a good way to transition into the next idea, but you summarize what you've heard. Make sure that people agree that what you're saying is what was said, and that they don't feel that you're misinterpreting anything that has been said. So by summarizing it, you have the opportunity to find out if you've missed anything or if you've misinterpreted anything, and it just kind of also gives people that last kick at the can to, oh yeah, well, I just thought of this, that type of thing. Okay. Any questions, comments on any of that information? This is really different than
I know. Hey,
doing
Heather.
it with everyone sitting in front of me here.
I know. I'm thinking maybe you could quiz us. Ask us a specific question about one of these topics and
Okay, well, so someone other than Jennifer,
or
why
Jeff.
shouldn't you flip chart things yourself?
Because you won't be in the moment. You will not be able to see to get the full feeling of what's going on and be, I guess, in the moment.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good way of putting it. Any other responses to that? Boy, I wouldn't want you guys in a discussion group. Okay.
Pam says it's
encouraging.
Too distracting. Pam typed in that it's too distracting. I guess being the flip charter and the facilitator at the same time.
Yeah. Okay, encouraging participation. So we'll make this a participation section. What are some ways to encourage participation? Let's see. Olivet, what suggestions do you have? Is Olivet still there?
She is still here.
Okay, good.
Suggestions for participation. Ask
For
direct
encouraging
questions.
participation. Okay.
Ask specific questions. Have some questions when you go into the session so that when you find yourself at that point, in the event that things are lagging or perhaps going in the wrong direction that you don't want, if you ask specific questions, you can interrupt the focus of the group and bring them back on task.
Okay, but what if you ask a question and nobody says anything?
That probably won't happen.
Oh, let me tell you, it will happen.
Well, in my experience, somebody says something. You can't expect an immediate response, but before or give them a time limit, a couple of minutes, 2 or 3 minutes perhaps, and then ask another question or rephrase the question you've asked that you don't get a response for.
And actually, what Olivet just said, I think some people need to mute here because we're getting feedback. It's part of knowing your audience. Now, again, with doing it with the TLI, it's not as big of an issue, but if you're facilitating a group outside of Toastmasters, you need to know your audience, because depending on the cultures that you're dealing with, some cultures don't answer questions very quickly. And if that's the case, you need to know that, and you need to have the patience. And you've got to figure out whether it's they're not answering because they haven't understood your question or because it is a cultural thing, and you're just going to have to wait a couple of minutes before they start to answer.
We have a few more question or responses that folks typed in. Rhonda says, okay, make it a safe place to participate.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes sense. Pam says, ask open-ended questions, not just specific, I guess, but also open-ended. Get them talking.
Yeah, you definitely always want open-ended questions. You don't want the ones that can just be answered with yes or no. And because, again, we're trying to deal with idea generation. And so yes, no questions don't do that.
You know what, Heather? Do you think that simple questions are better or more complex questions? I can imagine a question being very hard to answer because you're stuck thinking about it.
I think you want to keep your questions as straightforward as possible. One of the things that you can do in advance when you know that you're going to be facilitating a group is you can also give them the questions in advance.
Mm-hmm.
So that people have a chance to think about it.
Mm-hmm. That's especially good for introverts. I know that that fits with what you were saying earlier about some people will want to come back later. Sarah suggested providing a prompt of some sort.
Yeah. You can certainly do that. And we do that when we have a focus group guide, which has the questions on it. We'll sometimes ask the question and then in brackets put some what are basically prompts that Sarah's mentioning, to get people thinking, so we're trying to make it clear as these are the types of things that we're looking for without, you always need to be careful, because sometimes then all people focus on are the things that you have down there, and then they don't go beyond that. So it's always a little bit of that fine line that you're walking with it. But, I mean, you can just conduct the brainstorming, which is just throwing out ideas. Whoever has ideas. Some people are going to be more vocal than others with those, and you're not necessarily going to get ideas from everybody. You can do a round table where you go around but when you do a round table, you give people the right to say no, but you just keep going around until everybody's done. And sometimes the first round, somebody might not throw out an idea, but maybe the second round they will, because they're starting to feel a little bit more comfortable. They're seeing the other ideas, and then part of it is ensuring that people are being respectful while this is being done, so that people do feel safe in putting out their ideas. And you can, if you've got a reasonable sized group, you could break them into smaller groups so that you've got 4 groups of 3 or 3 groups of 4 rather than 1 group of 12, if you want them to talk about a particular point, because then again, some people may feel more comfortable in talking in that smaller group than they will in the larger group. So break it down, and then you have each small group report back. But that's also a way of getting some people who are otherwise reluctant to offer suggestions to perhaps be a little bit more willing to speak up.
Yeah, Jennifer Stewart mentions that sometimes it's just a matter of getting someone started. So when someone starts the conversation, then others will join in. But I've observed what you're describing. 3 or 4 people might dominate the conversation, or maybe not even dominating it, but there are 2 or 3 that feel left out or appear to be left out.
Yeah. And, and part of your challenge as a facilitator is to be watching the group, see who's participating, see who's not participating, and try to get those people to make a comment. I mean, you can say things like, Melinda, do you have anything that you'd like to add to this? Or Daryl, do you agree with what's being said so far? Even if he only says yes, at least he said something. If he hasn't said anything yet, you at least know that he's thinking. Then you can, or if he says no, then you can follow it up with, well, what don't you agree with, and try to get him going that way. You've still got to accept that sometimes with some people, you're only going to get a yes or a no out of them, and if you can at least get that, it's a small start, and then you just keep trying to encourage them. Some folks have no problem whatsoever, and others, it is a challenge, and you may walk away from a group with there being the odd person who has not said anything, but because you're not doing things where you're trying to say, 40% of the group thought this or whatever. If you want to do things like that, you do a survey. You don't do a focus group or a discussion group. So you're not in a situation where you have to have an answer out of everybody to do that, but you want everybody to feel that they have that opportunity to contribute if they choose to. And then with any group, you often have those who disrupt things. And you see it sometimes just in a regular club meeting. And you see it in discussion groups. One's the talker, the person who does want to do all of the talking, and they like to hear themselves talk. They might not really even have anything to say. Jennifer and I were doing a session with homeschooled kids, and these were kids ranging in age from about 10 to 16. We're talking to them about presentation skills. And there was this one little guy there. I said to Jennifer afterwards, I really thought he needed to be in school because he obviously wanted to talk. And I don't think he got enough time to do that at home. Didn't matter what we asked. This kid had his hand up and said, and then you call on him, and sometimes he wouldn't even know what it was that he wanted to say, but he was pretty sure he had something. And he'd want to say something on most things, whether it really related to the question you asked or not. So you get those folks, and we are going to talk in a minute about how to deal with each of these. What are some other types of disruptors that you might get in a group?
The doters and the negative Nellies,
Yeah.
the know-it-all.
Sometimes
Quiet as a
malfunction
mouse.
from the environment.
Okay, who is the person other than Jennifer speaking?
Melinda, sorry, sometimes the disruptors are the environment, like air conditioning being noisy or going down, or
Yeah.
noise from the hallway, those kind of things.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, those are things that, but right now I'd like to focus on the people.
Yeah, well, a couple
who
of
might
folks.
be disruptors.
Yeah, a couple of folks have put in the chat room outside distractions, like people using cell phones. Maybe not that they're outside, but they're not paying attention to you, ignoring you, or disruptive
Okay,
somehow.
so you're looking for people disruptors, types of
Yeah.
personality
Yeah.
disruptors? Okay.
Yeah.
It's clear on the slide. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. But
That's not disruptive.
actually,
It's just rude.
The use of the cell phone could be one of your ground rules. No using cell phones, like turning your cell phones off while we do this. And I remember one time teaching a course, and it had been agreed at the start that people wouldn't be using their cell phones. Somebody sitting partway through the session, somebody's cell phone rings. The person not only doesn't just turn it off, she answers it. She doesn't get up from the table. She sits there at her table and has the conversation with the person who was calling her.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
So that's definitely a disruptor.
Sarah mentioned folks having side conversations. I think, side conversations are rough, and phone side conversations are rough too.
Well, yeah. The side conversation, definitely. There's the interrupter, the one who wants to cut people off and not have to wait for their turn. The chatterer is kind of that side conversation that Sarah was mentioning, where somebody's saying something, and then this one person is sitting there and saying to the person next to them, well, can you believe that? Or, carrying on a conversation about something that has no relationship to what's being talked about, but they're just making noise and they're interrupting things. The arguer is kind of the doter, can be the doter or the negative Nelly that Jennifer mentioned, that they want to disagree with anything that they said. Now, I took these actually out of the facilitating discussion manual, and they have the silent type. Now, I don't know that the silent type is really a disruptor because they're silent, but they're not participating, so you're not getting the information. We have already talked about them, but the others are all ones that can make your life as a facilitator a challenge. So what do we do about these folks? Anyone have any suggestions? Oh, I don't know why my computer wants to do this. Go away. Okay, anyone have any suggestions for what we do about any of these disruptors?
Kick them out of the group.
Sometimes it's a matter of stopping and kind of looking and as if you're waiting for them to finish interrupting and saying whatever they have to say. And, is there anything that you'd like to say to everyone?
Yeah.
What would you like to share?
Yeah, Lisa basically said the same thing. Kind of call them out and say, what would you like to share with the rest of the group?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe they need to take it's a conversation they need to take outside.
Yeah. Okay, any other suggestions?
This is where I would use that parking lot. If someone's
Yes.
interrupting, say, that's a good idea. We're not on that topic right now. We'll put you on the lot and come back to it.
Yeah. Okay, I guess I want to go see this. I don't know. I assume you people are seeing this message that keeps coming up on my machine here. Do you? Since you're supposed to be sharing. I don't know why I keep getting it, and it won't let me click on the keep the current color scheme.
Are you still there, Heather? Well, this is odd. It seems silent to me. Anyone here?
I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can
I think
hear.
everyone but Heather is here.
Yeah.
I'm here. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's just wait for Heather to figure out her. I have a feeling she just lost her connection. So we may have to wait for her to reconnect. Well, while we're waiting, let's have a quick poll. Which of these types of disruptors do you see the most? Talker, interrupter, chatterer, arguer, or silent type?
As a trainer, I had one of each in my class. Every time it seemed.
Okay, so Melinda sees them all. How about Lisa Small? Are you on the line?
I am on the line.
So which one do you see?
Conversations are one of the most common
The side?
that I
Okay.
sidebars where people are having their own conversations.
Jennifer types in her thing, the interrupter. Pam, are you on the line?
Wow.
Hello.
Huh.
Who's this?
Oh, this is Suzanne, and
Okay.
I've lost like the.
Yeah, I know.
entire-
She's off. Heather lost her connection, so
Okay.
she's reconnecting.
Okay.
I hope.
Oh.
Actually, I don't know. But so Suzanne, which type have you seen the most? Talker, interrupter, chatterer, arguer?
Probably the chatterer.
The side
And
conversations.
sometimes the interrupter. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. How about Rhonda? What's your most dreaded type of disruptor? It's probably the drinker, those who go to drink wine in the middle of a conversation. Okay, let's move on to something more productive while we're waiting for Heather. So what are some ways do you think to address these folks? We've already talked about...
Sorry, Jeff.
Oh, are you back, Heather?
Well, I've got the phone because Alan came down and said, I'm not hearing you. I've been here talking away.
Oh, you were? Yeah, we lost your connection. I think whatever would pop up was happening, knocked you off the system. Do you want me to share the slides?
Okay, what was the last that you heard from me?
You were talking about disruptors.
Okay.
And then we started talking about how to handle disruptors, and you went silent.
No, she didn't.
Yeah. She went silent to us, Alan. You might have heard her loud and clear, but her voice does not project across the district.
Yeah.
Not without electronic.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't know what happened. Anyway, okay. So what I talked about was...
Okay, I'm going to pull up the slides for everyone. You are on the types of disruptors.
Oh, you can't see my slide?
Oh, no.
No.
You have to reconnect, Heather.
Oh, I see.
You've dropped out of the meeting.
Oh, okay. And my computer doesn't want to even... Okay, so I'll have to let you do the slides, Jeff, because I can't.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm totally frozen here. Okay, so how to handle the disruptors, the ground rules. Refer to the ground rules. And it's one of the reasons that it's so important to have the ground rules, is that then you can go back to them and say, okay, we agreed that only one person would talk at a time. Or we agreed to be respectful if someone's being very negative or arguing. So that's why it's really important to have those ground rules set up. For the ones that are having the side conversation, and I think Sarah mentioned this, was ask them to share with the group. Oh, so Jeff, do you have something you wanted to share with the group? Usually you don't, but it's an effective way of getting you to stop. Having somebody flip chart, we've talked about that before, but it allows you to monitor the group all the time so that you can try to prevent some of these situations. When you've got your back to the group and whatnot, it's easier for some of these situations to take place.
Hey, Heather, I've got a question about that.
Yeah.
Does it make sense to have the talkative person be the flip charter, or could that backfire?
Yeah, it could, but as I mentioned, you really want to try to get several people, and you may have somebody else flip charting initially because it may take a while to identify who the talkative one is. But yeah, then you could perhaps call on the talkative one when it's time to switch your flip charters, the person your scribe, have them switch. One of the things you do want to kind of check occasionally, look, and it's one of the things of going back when I talked about summarizing. You want to be sure that whoever is doing the flip charting for you is kind of putting down what people are saying. I mean, you often have to shorthand things, but you don't want them to be just their take on it. So, you know, it's not really what the person has said, it's what the person who's flip charting thinks should have been said. And so the summarizing makes sure that that type of thing doesn't happen. Another way is when you have people having the side discussion, you just stop talking. If you're talking when they do it, just stop until they've realized that nobody's talking and they start looking around, or if somebody else was talking and they're carrying on the side conversation, when the other person stops, don't ask for any other ideas until the people having the side conversation stop talking. And then again, mention the ground rules to them. And then acknowledge people's concerns. And that's the parking lot that you had mentioned early on, Jeff, is that, yes, I understand that this may be an issue. It's just not an issue that we can deal with at this time. So we need to, we'll put it here on the parking lot. If we have an opportunity to get to it later, we will. If not, it's something we can talk about after the session is done. But acknowledge that they do have a valid concern. Okay. Any other suggestions or anything there? No? Am I still here?
You are still here, and everyone is
Okay.
very happy with your solutions.
Okay. And then finally, some things to remember is, oh, yeah? Somebody have a comment? Okay, I guess not. Things to remember, show energy. When you're the facilitator, when you're starting things off, don't stand up there saying, oh my God, looking as though you're thinking, I wish I was anywhere but here. You know, be energetic and let the group feed off of your energy. If you come across as with a lack of energy and everything, it's not going to encourage them to participate, because it's sort of like, oh, well, this person doesn't want to be here, so, you know, why do I want to be here? Why should I participate? And then determine the importance of things not on your agenda or not on your list of questions. And we've talked about this before, where sometimes things come out that you decide you need to let people talk about this. Even though it wasn't what you had planned to, you realize that it's an important issue for this particular group. You know, if it's only one person, you're going to probably want to try to push that off to the side. But if you get the sense that multiple people have this concern or this issue, then it's probably something that you want to deal with in the group, even though it may mean that you don't get to do everything that you wanted to beforehand. And then, as I've said many, many times, be flexible. It's just kind of at the top of the list of what's important with facilitating discussions, in my opinion. Recognize that difference of opinions are okay. you don't all have to agree. You're there trying to get ideas. It might be a group where you want to get consensus, but even with consensus, it still doesn't mean that everybody has to 100% agree. I don't know what other people use for consensus, but for me, whenever it's a consensus thing, it's like, if you can live with it, then you go with it. It might not be exactly what you want, but if you feel strongly about it, that if you're saying, I cannot live with this idea, this solution, this approach, whatever, then you haven't reached consensus. But often a consensus is everyone compromising to some extent. But when you're just trying to get ideas for different ways of doing things or whatnot, say, differing opinions are fine. And you are there to gather information and ideas. Again, I mentioned this right at the very start, is that you're not the expert. You're not there in that role. I mean, you may be for what you're doing, but that's not really why you're there. You're there to gather information and ideas. And something that I don't have on the PowerPoint, but I want to mention, is that generally speaking, when you're facilitating a discussion group, you don't want to have a PowerPoint. And does anyone have a reason why?
It looks like a hidden agenda.
Okay, it looks like a hidden agenda. That's anything else?
I would also think it goes more to teaching than to facilitating.
Yeah.
Actually, Heather, this is I've used PowerPoint to capture ideas that come up during discussions in real time. So it can be a positive working.
Yeah, but that's using it like an electronic notepad, not as a presentation, right?
Yeah. And what I'm saying is, you don't have things on a PowerPoint, a pre-prepared PowerPoint to say, because you're like, what happens is when you do that is, so you say, oh, what do you think? Why do you think that we do this? Practice in this way or whatever. And again, if you're doing it where you're saying, we're just trying to gather ideas, generate ideas, and then you say, well, the experts say, here, in effect, by putting up things on the PowerPoint that you prepared in advance, saying, here's the right answer. If you guys came up with this, well, then good, but whatever else you might have come up with doesn't really matter. And so it is more, when you're using PowerPoint, it is more about training rather than facilitating ideas, gathering ideas. So you don't want to be, you might have something, if you really thought it was necessary, you could have something at the start to, explain the purpose of why you're here, or, with doing the club officer breakout ones, for example, you could have a couple of slides to quickly review the role of whatever it is that you're doing. And then you turn it off and the rest of it's discussion. But if you've only got a couple of slides, chances are they aren't necessary anyway. So
yeah, Rhonda adds that PowerPoint equals preconceived, and I suppose that fits in with what you're saying about.
Yeah, precisely. So you are kind of giving that appearance that you've already decided what the outcome should be, rather than you're there to collect the information and collect their ideas.
That said, I really like the idea of giving folks, hey, here's some interesting ideas, or this is what we've observed, right? Like you said, this is what the club sergeant at arms does. Now let's figure out how you're going to solve this problem.
Yeah, you can do it as a jumping off point for providing information that, okay, now we want to talk about this, but not when you're there, if it's something that you just want opinions on how well is the meeting run.
Right. Hey,
Lisa,
Lisa Small makes kind of the same point, and I guess the idea is within whatever this word is, facilitating. That PowerPoints or slides are starting points, right? They're jumping off points. Is that the word you just used? Or the phrase? Yeah. As opposed to the actual conversation guide.
Well, yeah, and rather than a list of ideas that are preconceived ideas, sometimes in a group, especially in a larger group setting, having one idea or two ideas to get the juices going, to get the thoughts flowing and people participating will start a conversation, whereas a blank, okay, what do you all think, results in silence. It's just a thought.
Yeah, and it is true, like that can happen. But as I say, it's sometimes walking a fine line, because I know, for example, we're going to do a questionnaire on a program, and we have a focus group with some people involved with it to try to get their ideas of, what information do you need? What sorts of things do you want asked? That type of thing. And we've gone in sometimes with a couple of questions to give them an idea of the types of things we could ask. And then they look at it and they say, oh, that's fine. And we can't get anything else out of them. So you run that risk as well. So as I say, it is a bit of a fine line, but it can certainly help get the juices flowing and get some ideas going. But other times it's actually going to get people fixated on those and thinking, well, okay, you've got some good ideas there. We don't need to give you any more. But, any other questions or comments on anything at all with the facilitation?
I think it's really important to be flexible. Like you said, Heather, a million times, flexibility is so important. And my motto is flexibility is key for almost everything that I do, because you just never know, what kind of a path something can take, and you have to have a diversion, or you have a distraction, or there's so many variables that can happen, and you have to have some ad hoc activities that you can pull out of your pocket to help guide that conversation too. But really, and knowing your audience, that's super important.
Yeah. For sure. Okay, any other comments? Well, if there's none, that's it for the facilitation part. And then Jeff, I guess it's over to you.
Yep, we have a few things to do still. I'm sending out a survey, a link to a survey, so please sign in and hold on, let me resend it because I'm having issues with hyperlinks here. Yes, go to the survey link, fill it out. That way you will get official credit, and I will try not to bother you anymore. We are going to be repeating this training because we want to have everyone, all the folks who are going to be facilitating the officer breakout sessions, right? We definitely want them to go through this training. It'd be better if they can attend the live training, which will happen, I think it's January 7th. Is that correct, Heather?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So January 7th, if they can attend that, that would be ideal. If they cannot attend that, they do have the ability to watch or listen to one of these sessions after the fact. But I think participating live definitely gives the best experience. Let's see, anything else? So Pam says, where is the live training? This is the live training, Pam. Maybe I misspoke there, but participating in the session as it actually occurs, as opposed to listening to a recording of it. I've done training both ways, and I don't know. Participating live, real time, seems to work better.
Mhm.
So I'm going to stop recording. Actually, no, I think I'll continue recording because I wanted to show you folks some information on the Moments of Truth survey. I believe we're done with Heather's thing, so let's thank Heather. Thank you everyone for attending this effective facilitation training, and thank you very much, Heather, for putting this together and helping our district leaders provide better training for our members.
Mhm.
Thank
Thank
you. Certainly, any feedback that anyone has for me, please send it on, because as Jeff said, we are giving it again, so anything that we can do to make it better, I appreciate knowing it.
Yeah, if you fill out that form, there is a free text field, so you can, give the numeric values. Yes, it was great. It was a perfect, but you can also give ideas for improvement. So Heather, you're getting all sorts of thanks for all the work you've done, and thanks from Heather, and thanks from Jennifer. Thanks to everyone. Thanks from everyone. Okay, so let's switch gears just briefly. I wanted to remind you, everyone, that we're going through this Moments of Truth, kind of a district in, I don't know what you would call it, Heather, a district initiative to do Moments of Truth all over the place. So let me show you. This is an example of the Moments of Truth survey that I've put together for the entire district. So we're collecting, we've have, what is it, a dozen or so questions. They're based on the individual's experience with the club or the individual's description of or how they feel about their club. So this first set of questions is about, I'm able to deliver a speech, I'm able to participate, I'm proud of my club. Those are all about the individuals, how they feel about their club. And then down near the bottom are the my club does this, my club has all the roles filled, my club has meetings that exhibit fellowship and variety. If you read the wording on these are all questions related to the 6 moments of truth. And what I'm looking to do with this is we're collecting information on our district that will help us in the springtime kind of direct some of our activities, district training, towards things where we've not been so good in the past. Other things that Heather has actually mentioned, that some of these questions, a higher score is not necessarily better. For instance, that first one, I'm able to deliver a speech at club meetings as often as I would like. I mean, if you can always get on the agenda to give a speech, that suggests that a lot of folks in your club are not giving speeches. So anyways, that's something to think about. The whole point of this is food for thought. You will be presenting this to your clubs during the TLI. At least that is my intention. And let me show you, I just recently sent out area reports. So let's pick an area. So the area summaries look like this. It'll have a list of all the clubs in your area and how many responses you've gotten from each club. So this should help you figure out, this club has, or these clubs have 18 members. Let's see, Portsmouth Toastmasters has 18 members. You've had 3 responses, so there's still quite a bit of room to go off and get more members to respond. The other thing here is area visits for your area directors. Think of this as an awareness. For the most part, I'm seeing answers of yes, but the no's and the unknowns, those are folks that maybe either missed a meeting or just don't know what an area director is. So keep that in mind if you see a lot of those. And the actual club reports will have even more details. So you'll be seeing the club reports. This is not a good club report. There weren't enough responses for that one. So where some clubs will have, like this club had 13 responses, a whole bunch of members responded. You can see the breakdown of responses. They always feel this way or they don't feel this way at all. Looks like this particular club, everyone's pretty well happy about it. And there's a whole bunch of comments. So I'll be presenting or providing all of this information for each individual club so they can read through the comments, read through their information, and use that to decide how they want to address issues in their club. Okay, so that's it. You guys have any questions about these Moments of Truth surveys?
No.
I'm hoping they're fairly straightforward. I've had a lot of good feedback about them. How many times have members received the link? I sent the link. Let's see, I sent the link in a broadcast to the entire district about a week ago, 2 weeks ago. Well, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago. And actually Division E went off and did a focused activity. You can see here, Division E had 70 responses. So Sharon Joseph went off and did a campaign, posted the link on the division Facebook page, and sent out messages to individual clubs, I think. And Sharon asked me if I could send her the latest club surveys, and it turns out no one has sent any new information, Sharon. So the stuff that you got last week is the same for Division E.
That's great, Jeff. I actually emailed each individual. I downloaded the member list for Division E, and I emailed each individual person the link as well.
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it, because I know there were many people that tune out the messages from Constant Contact. And honestly, Heather, as much as I love the district newsletter, I know folks don't follow every single link in the district newsletter. Can you believe it? Thankfully, Heather must have closed off her ears.
Totally astounding that the people wouldn't check every link in that.
But yeah, I know, because there's so much information there. But anyways, this is important because this helps us really understand, really know what's going on with our district. And one of the primary goals of this TLI cycle is to take these little nuggets of information and build an action plan. Get the club officers thinking about, hey, my club is telling me that they want to know more about activities outside of our club. How are we going to make sure that they know about it? Or my club members are telling me that we don't know about their goals. How am I going to change that? How am I going to figure out what our club really needs in order to have fulfilled members? So this is a very powerful tool, but we need the input from our members in order to really use it. So anyways, I just sent out to all the area directors sort of a reminder letter that they can send directly to their club officers and their club members. There's a QR code that you can, that folks are tech savvy can scan and do it right on their phone or their tablet. So lots of ways, but really at this point it's about you guys, from the grassroots.
Jeff, this is Teresa. Do you know who has or who has not taken the survey?
It is an anonymous survey. I deliberately made sure I don't know, but the forms that I sent you tells you how many people from each particular club, right? So, for whatever your area is, you can say, okay, I've got 18 members in this club, but only 3 have responded. So I think it's fairly safe to go to that club and say, ask the officers to remind everyone, or to print out a letter or put that QR code on their agenda, or forward an email, whatever it takes. Honestly, I'd love to see you guys do some creative communication with your club members. I'd like to see what you come up with, whether it's direct messages to everyone or your own little area contest. See if you can, whose club can be the first to get 100%, response rate or something like that.
So I guess my concern is, like, I don't recall taking this survey, and I've been having a couple of issues with email. I just recently changed my email address on the Toastmasters International website, so it's going to a different email address and hopefully won't get blocked from my company.
Right, that could be bad. Yeah.
So I'm not 100% sure that I've taken this survey. It doesn't sound familiar to me, but maybe I have. So if I take it again, like,
you'll be stacking the deck.
How bad is my student? Yeah, exactly.
As long as you don't take it 4, 5, 10 times, I don't think it'll matter. But you're absolutely right. That is a risk with this. The other thing that's going on is I do keep track of the timestamps. So we're going to be repeating this survey again in the spring, near the end of the Toastmasters year, to use as a tool for the summer, right, for the summer TLIs. So I don't know whether we'll continue doing this every 6 months or it'll be an annual thing, but the idea there is we'll be able to see waves of responses. Let me actually pull up that survey and show you what it looks like. Now I got to remember where the link is. There's the link for this is the link not for the Moments of Truth. I just posted in a chat box the link for Heather's training.
Okay.
Give me a minute and I'll find the link for the Moments of Truth. Okay, so you guys should all have a letter. Well, not all of you. Those of you who are area or division directors should have seen this letter. So here's the nice long link. Let me see if I can copy this and paste it in our. Anyways, that's the Moments of Truth survey, and it's pretty distinct. Moments of Truth survey. You select your club from the long list, and then go through and answer some questions. It'll take 1 to 2 minutes. It'll take longer if you really want to think about it. It's fairly short, and they're all based on, again, the Moments of Truth, dimensions of the Moments of Truth.
Is that from so this survey is different from the training session that occurred?
It's completely independent. Has nothing whatsoever to do with it. It is a Google form, but it's a completely different survey.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else have questions about this? Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us and for sticking around a little bit. Have a great evening, and we will see you at a TLI coming soon.